Okay, seems like most of you are done. Okay, so if you came in late, that's fine. So let's go over the answers to this. Okay. Okay, so true or false? I am smarter than my camera. That should be true. Okay. There are certain things your camera does better than you, but overall, you guys are smarter than your cameras. Okay. True or false? My camera will always choose the right exposure when shooting aperture priority. That is false. Okay. That was kind of the whole first portion of last week's lecture, right? Understanding camera metering and how it is limited. Okay, and that's not just in aperture priority, right? That's in auto mode, that's in shutter priority, program mode, all those modes. Okay. Which of the following modes can you control ISO? Okay, it's everything except for full auto. Okay, so you can almost always control your ISO. The camera meters for reflected light, that's true. Okay. If you're photographing a snow trip, you should be in positive exposure compensation, right? Because your camera thinks it's really bright, okay, and it's going to darken the exposure. Okay, so you need to tell it to get brighter. And then focus, frame, and shoot, right? I had that little diagram showing you how the geometry gets off. Okay, so it's focus, frame, and shoot that makes your, possibly, the picture could come out blurry. And then, all right, for the last one, does anyone have a sentence that they would like to volunteer? Or I will just call on someone. Josh.
To get the right exposure, use exposure compensation to override your camera's meter.
Oh, that's very good. All right. Does anyone have anything different? Like completely outlandish? No? Okay. All right. That's fine. Mine's exposure compensation overrides the exposure setting that the camera metering system chooses, right? We're basically saying the same thing. Okay, so you just have to understand the relationship, right? Exposure compensation is you're overriding the camera's decision. Okay? All right, any questions from the quiz? Any questions that came up? No. Okay. So now I'm going to show you guys a couple pictures that some people submitted for their homework. Okay, and I'm going to actually have them explain what they did. Okay, so you don't know if your picture's in here right now, so if you submitted something, you should be on your toes. Okay? All right, first person. All right. Alan. Alan. All right, Alan, can you tell us, like, what you were trying to get at, and then... Oh, okay. Why are you guys laughing, man? Okay, well, what were you trying to do? How did you do it? Okay? And then what was kind of difficult about it?
I saw your example that you did send us with the person sitting in the hallway multiple times.
Okay.
I was trying to get kind of similar effect. So I just changed the shutter speed to about 30 seconds and then was in a completely dark room and lighted myself in certain poses, and then when it became dark, I moved into a different pose and then lighted myself again in the same time for the third time.
Okay, so when you lit yourself, how did you light yourself when you say you light?
I had Sharon in the room, and she used her camera's flash
okay.
to light the room.
So she was like kind of far away? Or okay, so then she was just blasting you with light. Okay, so if you guys can imagine what he's doing, he's basically sitting there on the couch, and then someone is basically doing this, right? Like, hold on.
I wish I had that.
Yeah, this is a lot more convenient, but they're basically just doing this to you, right? Okay, so, right, and then do it 3 times, right? That's basically what you did. Okay, great. Okay, so that's along the right lines, okay? That's basically how you get these kinds of multiple exposure shots. I'm gonna try to explain it more in detail, okay? After we see a couple more pictures. Okay, so that's good. Yeah, I really like this. Okay, Danielle. Okay, can you explain to us what you did here? The camera at the, or the light at the camera, right? Yeah. Okay. So kind of try to imagine that scenario. She's sitting there, okay? Lights are on, camera shutter exposure starts. After 2 seconds, light goes off. Okay, remember the camera only sees it only sees reflected light. Okay, so when that lamp goes off, basically the camera's blind to what's going on in that room. At that point, Danielle starts to move, right? But it doesn't detect that. Okay, she takes the flashlight and then now she starts drawing. It only sees the flashlight at that point. Okay, now if the flashlight were pointed towards her, right, it would see her, right? But the flashlight's pointed towards the camera, right, which makes it see whatever she's drawing. Okay, so that's kind of how this works. Okay, this light painting thing. Okay, so I didn't explain to you how it really works on purpose, right, to see if you guys can figure it out. And to varying degrees, people were able to, right? So which was I was happy about. Okay. So Irene, can you explain what you did here?
So I set the camera on like my kitchen counter. I didn't have anything on me, so what I did is I set the shutter speed to about 10 seconds, and then as soon as I pressed it, I moved back and then started messing with the light.
It was just like this. Okay. All right. That's what it looks like. 2 flashlights. Okay. Was it from like Daiso, like one of those LED things? Because that's what you can see. It has like trails of like 5 at a time. So you can also see like what the light kind of looked like. So some people use their cell phones and you can see the keypad sometimes. Like yeah. Okay. So basically, on this one, it wasn't completely dark, right? So you can see the shutter or the blinds in the background, right? So whatever light there is, the camera's going to see it. Okay, so that's an important concept to remember. Okay, when you're doing these long shutter speed, it just basically takes whatever it sees over that 30-second period or 10-second period, and it mashes it all together. It mashes it all together. So whether it's a single point of time where you flash, okay, or it's a long exposure of a little bit of light, okay, it's going to just add it all together into one picture. Question?
In the previous picture, when you're shining the flashlight directly at the camera, how does it prevent it from like overexposing the entire image? Like the whole thing being white?
The flashlight would have to be pretty strong for that to happen. Right? So you're thinking of like sunlight. When you point at sunlight, it goes like, right? Sunlight's really strong, right? A lot stronger than a flashlight is. Yeah. And that's the reason you have that. Lenses are, we're going to talk about that today actually, but lenses are built to withstand like light shining at it, right? They're designed, they're engineered so that that doesn't cause it to like blow out. Okay, but sunlight is so strong that it still happens. Basically. Okay. All right, Darren. And Darren, right?
So I have it on the table and I set the 10-second timer, and the shutter speed was maybe a couple of seconds in. And so I set the timer around to that right there where I had the buzzer right there, and then I just had the flashlight thing drop.
What was the actual light source? Was it a flashlight or? Oh. Okay, it has a lot of LEDs. Okay. Also, it looks like it's pretty bright in the room, right? Okay, so but then you set the ISO really low, right? In order to have a long shutters. Okay. Right. Great. Okay, this stuck out to me because balanced well, like actual daylight didn't require the room to be dark, and he managed to do the light painting. That's actually a lot harder. Okay. All right. So this is the one that I did really fast. Just a caveat is that this is heavily post-processed. Okay, so this looks nothing like the original picture. I'm a firm believer in the philosophy that photography doesn't end when you take the picture. That the post-processing is a really important part of it, and so I'm fine with that. I will show you guys the original picture next week when we talk about post-processing. Okay, to just illustrate some concepts. Okay, but basically. Should have been a dark room, but it wasn't. Okay, it was. There was a little bit of ambient light because my roommates were in the other room, so the hallway had a little bit of light. Okay, so what you see is one of my housemates, Jason. I told him, okay, you're gonna face the wall and you're just gonna alternate down the hallway, and you're just gonna run down. I'm gonna flash you with light. Okay, and so then he would be going, and then I would basically take this, right, and I basically would keep flashing him, right, every time he moved. Okay, so then I get different exposures of him. The reason he looks a little bit transparent is because there was ambient light. Okay, so in the time that he's not there, the camera sees the hallway because there's ambient light. So it looks like he's see-through. If it was completely dark and I was just using my flash, then it would have been a lot less transparent. He would have been a lot more opaque. Okay, here's another one, right? So Jason attacking himself. So basically this is just same thing, same idea, 2 exposures with flash, right? And then everything else is just an LED light that I just drew, okay? Done really hastily. Okay. So the concept is simple, it's hard to execute and get a good picture. It takes some practice. Okay. Any questions about like painting? All right, so this is actually a cool like creative thing that you guys can do. Like, I don't know, like when you go to like Battery Park, right? And then it's like dark, and then you can take a picture, you know, flash the group, and then in the meantime you can draw like koinonia or A2F. You know, I've seen those pictures before, right? And you guys have seen it too. So that's just the one creative thing that you guys can do. Okay, so we're gonna move on with the material now. So today it's gonna be lenses and then composition. So the first half is gonna be really technical, and then the second half is gonna be very, very soft. Okay, like composition is not really a science, so you guys will now have to get into technical mode. Okay. So some of these topics we've talked about before. So for example, focal length, right? Focal length determines the angle of view, right? So in order to summarize, it's basically just, right, how zoomed in are you, right? And on your cameras, right, you'll see the focal length of your camera, right? We talked about how there's a crop factor for certain cameras, right, which I will discuss again in the next slide. But basically all you need to understand is that a smaller number means it's zoomed out, has a wide angle of view, right? And if you have a larger number, you have a longer focal length, which means you're zoomed in, right, which means the angle of view is more narrow. Okay? And just to give you guys a little bit of perspective, our eyes are about similar to a 50mm lens, okay? So each eye. So together, our eyes are more than 50, or the number would be less because we're actually able to scan more than a 50mm lens, but each individual eye is equivalent to a 50mm lens. Yeah, okay, if we have time in the last week, we'll talk about the differences between the eye and a camera lens, because that actually helps you understand why what you see on a picture is not sometimes what you see in real life. Okay, so then we talked about equivalent focal length in week 1, I believe, right? There's this number on your camera, but that's not actually what you're shooting at because some camera camera sensors are different sizes. All right, so I'm just gonna speed through this, right? And I told you that Canon cameras often have 1.6 times, and then Nikon cameras have 1.5 times. Okay, so hopefully this is review. Now, in order to get the true or equivalent focal length that you're shooting at, you need to multiply the crop factor to the focal length on your camera lens. Okay. So now moving on. This is mostly for just your benefit in vocabulary, okay, and being able to talk about photography stuff. Okay, so in terms of types of lenses, there's 2 main types, right? There's zoom lenses and then there's prime lenses. Okay, so zoom lenses are like the lens that I use is a zoom lens. Most of what you guys have is a zoom lens. I think Hannah has a prime lens, right? The difference is that a zoom lens zooms, right? You can change the focal length, right? Whereas a prime lens is fixed at one focal length, okay? Let's see. So you might have seen like the big white, like big lenses that some of our photographers use, right? That's a zoom lens, but it's on the telephoto range. Okay, so the telephoto range is generally from 80 millimeters to 1,000 millimeters. Okay, in real life, we only use like 80 to like maybe 300, right? It's practical, right? Anything beyond that is like overkill. So that's like really zoomed in, right? Those zoom lenses. Whereas the wide end, right? Anything less than 28, anything less than like 30 is considered pretty wide. Okay, you can see a lot. And then normal is considered 28 to 90. Okay, again, these are just words that you can use. Okay, so now prime lenses, why would anyone want a lens that only lets you have one focal length, right? And the reason is because that lens at that focal length, because it's designed for that one single thing, the quality is usually a lot better. Okay, the quality is a lot better and it tends to be cheaper and it tends to be lighter and smaller. Okay, so it has a lot of benefits. Problem is that if you want to get different types of shots, you have to have a lot of different lenses, Okay, that's why most people go with the zoom lens, because it's convenient. Okay, so in terms of lenses, okay, we can talk about image quality, right? Photographers will tell you that image quality depends a lot on the lens, actually, right? Because the lens is what's filtering the light through, right? And lenses all have defects, and because of defects, you might lose a little bit of image quality. Now, the topic of image quality is actually really, really technical. We're not going to talk about it that much, but I just want you to understand that some pictures are sharper than others, right? That's just true. Okay, and then some lenses transmit color better than others. Okay, some lenses transmit contrast better than others. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go through some common defects for lenses that you should be aware of. Okay, so there's a thing called distortion, right? And it's pretty self-explanatory. Okay, so the image, instead of coming out rectilinearly, right? So like if I take a picture of this gym, like those benches should be straight. Okay, but in the picture, the bench will be curved. Okay, and so that's an imperfection in the lens. Okay, especially in zoom lenses, right? And depending on where you are, you'll get a different type of distortion. For most zoom lenses at the wide end, so if you're taking a wide angle picture, you'll have some pin cushion distortion. Okay, and for most lenses, when you're at the narrow end or zoomed in, you'll have barrel distortion. Okay, that's just a general rule. Okay, another one is vignetting. So basically, it's the darkening of the outside, right, due to light fall off. So basically, what that is as the light is entering the lens, because some of the stuff on the edge gets lost into the lens and it bounces, you're going to get a little bit of darkening on the outside of your image. Okay, so that's light fall off. And actually, sometimes vignetting is used as a creative tool. So sometimes people add vignetting. Okay, so again, we call these lens defects, but sometimes because people get used to it and it evokes a certain emotion, people will include them in your image. Okay, so here's an example of vignetting, right? And here, this one's a little more subtle, but you can still tell that the outsides are vignetted. Okay, and oftentimes it's used to bring attention to the middle of the picture. Okay, but when it's overly used, it's kind of tacky. Okay, so don't go adding vignetting to everything you do. Okay. That's all I have to say about this. Sharpness. Some lenses are sharper than others, but we're not going to really discuss this. Okay, I just need you to know that. Okay, and that's why people pay for really, really expensive lenses. Okay, like studio photographers who will buy like a prime lens that's $2,500 because it's like the sharpest thing available, right? For them, every pixel matters, right? So like wedding photographers, they use like these really expensive lenses, right? Because people don't want blurry pictures, right? Now, getting into some more practical defects or things that you might experience on a more regular basis and notice, right? There's lens flare. Okay? So lens flare is like when you get the streaks of light. So if you look at the top right corner, the sun's there, and across our bodies, you're getting these streaks of light with different colors. I think it's hard to see on the projector, but here's another example of that. So you can see on Judge's face, there's a big circle, right? That's lens flare. That's a product of lens flare. Okay. So now, how that happens is, it's basically when you're facing the sun. Okay, you're getting stray light. Okay, so let's say that even though the sun isn't in your picture, okay, let's say like I'm taking a picture over here, but the sun's over there and it's pointing down. It's still hitting the front of my camera lens, and because the sunlight is so strong, even though the lens is engineered to, like if it, you know, I only captured this light, because the sunlight is so strong, it's bouncing like however many times inside my lens and somehow getting to my image sensor. Okay, and that's basically how lens flare gets produced. Okay, that's why it's often just either in like a spotlight or sunlight. Okay, it's when the light that's shining at your camera is a lot stronger than the surrounding light. Okay. So now, what can we do to prevent it? Okay, so the main principle is that if the front element of the lens, so the front element is the very front glass portion. Okay, if the front element of the lens is in the shade, then lens flare is just not possible. Okay, there's no way that lens flare can appear. Okay, it only happens when there is sunlight hitting the front. So the action item is get the front element of the lens in the shade. Okay, that's basically what you need to do. Now there's different ways to do that. Okay, so a lot of your cameras don't have the lens hood, but you might have seen lens hoods, right?
And like for example, my camera has this lens hood, right? People will ask, what is the lens hood for, right? And it's not to make your lens look bigger, right? Right. The purpose of a lens hood is to prevent that stray light from hitting it. Okay. Now lens hoods are not perfect because they're designed to only prevent a certain amount, right? And because if it's too big, then it's going to get in the picture, right? So lens hoods are designed to prevent most things from the side, but when you're shooting with the sun in front of you, often you still can't prevent it. Okay. The lens hood's not enough. Okay. So then what you can use is your hand. Okay. So sometimes, like, especially when I'm doing backlit pictures, right? I like doing backlit pictures. That means the sun is in front of me, right? And often I'm gonna get lens flare, okay, if I'm in direct sunlight. So you'll see me like, I'll be holding my camera with one hand and I have my hand in front, right? And I'm basically trying to find a spot where I'm blocking the sun for the lens. So the lens is in shade, but my hand's not in the picture. Sometimes it's impossible, like geometrically impossible. Then you have to change like your zoom, right? What focal length you're at, okay? But that is the only way you can prevent lens flare if you want to prevent it. Okay. Use composition, so you can think about the things around you. So if there's a tree, and let's say if you take 5 steps to the right, you can use that tree to block the sun. That's great. Okay, then you should just do that. Okay, it makes it a lot easier. Or you can just work with the lens flare. Okay, sometimes it's not too bad, especially if it's not on your subject itself. Okay, so those are the options that you have, and I'm pretty sure you guys will experience lens flare. Okay, if you're shooting outside. Okay, the next defect is chromatic aberration. This one is not, I just want you guys to know what it is, okay? So if you look carefully on the white sweater on the left circle, there's a red line across, like on the border of his jacket. So like right here. So if you look at this PowerPoint later more closely, but there's a red line there, and then sometimes there's a blue line. On the bottom circle, there's also a red line on the edge of the bag, right? That is not how it looks in real life, right? So why does that happen? Okay, it's because different color lights, right, at different wavelengths, they diffract at different angles, right? And lenses are designed to accommodate for that, but again, they're not perfect, right? And especially more entry-level lenses have a lot of chromatic aberration. The only way to fix that is through post-processing, right? Usually I don't worry about it. It doesn't bother people too much. You probably didn't notice those things until I told you, right now. Right now you're going to notice them. But it's mostly for like if you're doing a picture that's going to be used for something big, then you want to correct it as much as possible. So in those kinds of situations, I would correct this, right? For example, I saw the Places like shots that they did like on the big poster, and they blew it up. It's like really big, but then I noticed some chromatic aberration on the people. So if you look at their faces, like there's some like red like outlines and things like that, right? So that can be easily removed, right? And so those are the kinds of situations where I would want to remove it, right? For daily pictures, it doesn't really matter. Yes.
Say remove it, you mean in post-processing?
In post-processing, there's no way to do that in camera. Yeah. Right. With software, it's pretty easy to remove. Yeah. Let's see. Okay. So that's it for lens defects. We're continuing on the topic of lenses because we're going to talk about depth of field. So I know several of you guys have been asking me, okay, how do you get that like shallow depth of field look? And, like I want to make the background look blurry and out of focus and look so cool in RC, right? So how do I do that, right? Okay. So basically, that's what we're going to discuss. Okay. So ready? You guys want to learn it? Yeah. All right, ready? Okay, ready? No, I'm just kidding. You don't have to learn this equation. Okay, I have no idea what this equation means. Yeah. Let's just skip that. Okay, so actually, well, we are going to look at the equation, but you don't have to learn it. Okay, I don't know it off the top of my head, but it's just going to be to show you that there's actually this is all geometry. Okay, a lot of photography is just geometry. And a lot of it's just physics, okay? And what you get out of it is a good picture, right? So depth of field, right? It's the portion of a scene that's in focus, right? So the depth of field we're looking at in this equation is, for example, like I don't know the exact units, but it's some length. Basically, it's some length, like how much
of the picture is in focus, right? And that depends on 4 main factors. Okay, so N, which is aperture, right? But the aperture number, okay, aperture number. F, which is the focal length, okay, focal length, so how much you're zoomed in. S, which is the distance from the subject, okay. So that's basically the point at which you're focusing. So distance from subject, the same thing as how far away the point is that you're focusing is. Okay, and then circle of confusion, which I will explain later, okay. All right, so 3 of these, you already know what they are, right? Aperture, focal length, and distance from the subject. That's not too hard to understand. Okay, so now we have to think about the relationship between these. Okay, so we already talked about for aperture, if you have a small f number, right, then you have a small depth of field. Right, I wrote here large f number gives large depth of field, or small aperture, right? You guys all remember that, right? From week 1? Okay, good. All right, so then the second thing though, okay, is that a shorter focal length gives larger depth of field, right? So, no, put it the opposite way. If you want less depth of field, if you want more stuff to be out of focus, then you want a longer focal length, okay? But you can't just increase your focal length, right? Like if you're taking a picture of someone, right, and then you're at a certain focal length, and then you just zoom in, right, you're gonna get like their nose, right? So then you're gonna have to step back, right? But now look at the next one, right? Longer distance to the subject gives larger depth of field. So I'm saying if you're closer to the subject, you get less depth of field. But then I just zoomed in and I just walked backwards, right, to fit them in my picture. So it seems like they're counteracting each other. Do you guys see this relationship? Okay. So it's kind of tricky. Okay, it's kind of tricky. Like there's no one easy way to do this. So now just thinking about those 3 so far, okay, the way that photographers think about depth of field is not through this equation. Okay, the equation was just to scare you guys. Okay, so it's really just intuition. Okay, like when I am taking pictures and I know the kind of shot that I want to get, it's really just intuition and trying different shots. Okay, but that only comes from taking a lot of pictures. Okay, so it's intuition, but it's intuition from having done it before, right? It's just kind of memory from what you've done in the past. Okay, so the only way to really understand depth of field is to really try it. Okay, I'm giving you the guidelines right now. Okay, but yeah. That's the main thing I want to say is that you have to just go out and try it. And you're going to have time later to try to do this. Okay. The last thing, the large circle of confusion. The easiest way to explain this is that your sensors have mini lenses on them that so each of those mini lenses basically captures 1 pixel on your camera, on your picture. Right? So if you have like a 15 megapixel camera, you have 15 million of these lenses. In mini lenses or micro lenses, and the bigger those are, the larger your Wait a minute. Okay, I'm not gonna explain it like this. I'm confusing myself. Okay, the way I'm gonna explain it is that more expensive cameras have a smaller circle of confusion. Okay, more expensive cameras have a smaller circle of confusion. So my camera has a smaller circle of confusion than basically all of yours, except for maybe people who are borrowing really, really nice cameras. Okay, so then my camera has a narrower depth of field than all of yours, just by nature. I stand in the same spot, take the same shot as you, and I will have a smaller depth of field. Okay, but that's not something that can go against me too, right? Because I can't make it larger if I want. Okay. So to summarize in one sentence, right? If you want shallow depth of field, you want to get as close as you can to the subject, use the largest focal length, use the largest aperture, and get a camera that has a large circle of confusion, which is basically a really expensive camera. Okay. So the last one you can't really control, right? But the first 3 you can. Okay, so that's what you're going to have to work with. Any questions about depth of field? I know that was a really fast overview. Okay, so like I said, the best way to do this is to just try it. Ignore that second bullet. That was from previous class that I taught. Okay, so I want you guys to try this, to take a shallow depth of field. So partner up with someone, okay? And take portraits of each other, try to get shallow depth of field, okay? It's gonna be easy in this gym because also what matters is the distance between the person and the thing that you want to put out of focus, right? So if the background's really, really far away, it's gonna be easier to make it out of focus. Okay, so try that, and then also try going outside and producing lens flare, and then that same picture, I want you to try preventing lens flare. Okay, so get a picture first that has lens flare in it, and then the same picture without lens flare. Okay, so I'll give you guys 15 minutes to do that. We'll meet back here at 2:30.
Johnny, you got one.
So, tell me what to do. Should I pose?
Happy, are you naked? Get as close as possible.
You have to put center focus. Pose focus first. Focus and then Once I like take a picture like this, I take a picture like this. The bar is not. Can you get light flare for this?
Flare? Yeah, you can.
You can.
You know the easiest way to get lens flare?
What?
just like lick your lens, make it really dirty. Then you get lens flare every time.
Can you get lens flare from nothing?
You can.
Wow. Like this.
That's sick. The easiest way to get lens flare is to just lick your lens.
Oh,
What?
It makes your lens dirty.
I see.
So,
Fall into the Bible.
you just
This
take
way.
pictures from
Oh,
here?
dude, you have a nice prime lens. Is that a 51.4?
I don't know.
It is. Nice.
It's a 51.4.
It's a pretty nice lens. It's like $350. It's more expensive than the other one I mentioned.
I don't know.
Okay, so
Why?
this is focus, right? So it's auto, and you just gotta focus.
You don't have to touch that.
Yeah. So it's auto, right? Yeah. And then this one. Okay. One in the Bible like this. So I want to get as close as possible and zoom out as much as possible, right?
Zoom in.
Zoom. Oh. Okay, turn sideways. Holy Bible.
That's a nice wrist trick.
That's not. It's a little different.
Give me that Bible back.
Oh, I don't hear. See if I can get pictures back.
Oh, watch out. You can also get lens flare via flash.
Oh!
My bad.
It's so sometimes if I'm like too close and it can't autofocus.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. There's a Oh, I should probably discuss that. There's a minimum focusing distance for every camera.
When you did the focus thing, what setting? Because you know how it instead of the first thing you did.
Oh, it's just aperture. So you're just changing the aperture.
Oh no! You did something else, like the zone of focusing.
Oh. Press this.
Uh-huh.
Then you can change.
So what setting was it before? It's auto, right? So that's everything. So
It tries to choose for you.
So it
And
should.
I'm the school of thought that says don't let the camera choose anything.
I see. But for you want to make the background blurry, you have to kind of focus in the middle. Otherwise, it's kind of blurry.
No, not necessarily. You can focus on something on the side and still do it.
I think autofocus.
Oh, but I mean like it's an auto. It cannot be auto.
So there's at one point, but like, how do I make this like not
Oh, what? Set that.
I guess I could do something.
Yeah, that's probably the best way.
Oh, I want to try something else. You don't move. Try.
What's wrong with this?
What's wrong with it?
Seem dark.
Zoom in as
I mean,
or
I think
zoom
it's
out
fine.
as
I think it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful
It's
picture.
like crazy blurry.
Ready?
That's what I'm going for.
Oh yeah, dude, that's great. That's probably like that's like 1 centimeter of focus right there. It's nuts because the back of the
Everything's blurry.
yeah, it's the side like Sunday worship service on the thing is blurry. That's why this I like this lens.
And you get
Nice. It's nice.
What is this?
That's
vignetting.
And then there's this thing called bokeh. Bokeh. It's a nice bokeh. But then those $2,500 lenses that the wedding photographers have really nice bokeh.
Is that the blurriness?
Yeah, it's the quality of the blur.
Japanese word.
So like, is that good blur? No.
That's a lens. It's a lens factor.
Oh man, the lecture's so boring.
Yeah.
Oh my!
So,
I was thinking those. You see that?
yeah.
It's frankly.
It's like you were playing games or something.
Oh, I don't want to.
I was trying to be encouraging student who cleans your home.
There's no way you can make lenses an exciting topic. It's so impossible. But next one is gonna be a lot more interesting.
But don't take it personally yourself. Also, in every single lecture.
Dude, Nathan, I saw you. I'm like, man, that guy's like falling asleep.
You saw me when?
During the lecture.
How did you see him? You're supposed to see a favorite part.
Because I was taking pictures of people and I took one of you sleeping.
No, Albert Locke. Albert.
All right, let's get back together to continue. Did anyone learn anything useful that you would like to share to the class? Besides, like, it's really hard and I don't get it. Did anyone experience trying to get close to the subject, but your camera wouldn't focus? All right, raise your hand if you experienced that. All right, that's good. Okay, so there's this thing called MFD, right? And that stands for minimum focusing distance. Every lens has that. Okay, so what that is your lens is designed to be able to focus in a certain range. Okay, so if you were, let's say like your minimum focusing distance for your camera is 2 feet, okay, and you were closer than 2 feet to your subject, okay, that means that it's impossible for you to focus. Your lens is not designed for that. Okay, so every lens has that, and yeah, that's probably why you weren't able to do that. Okay. So any questions that came out from doing the exercise? If you guys need any clarification. No? Okay. All right, so we're going to move on to a little more exciting topic than lenses, okay, so which is composition. Okay, so this is what people think of as like what you would learn in photography, right? Like what makes a picture look good, like how do you get pretty pictures. So I come from a school of thought that says this is hard to teach. This is really hard to teach. Technical stuff is easy to teach. It's hard to learn, right? But technical stuff will let you take these pictures, okay? So that's why I start the first 2 weeks off with the technical stuff. I want you guys to get familiar with your cameras. I want you to get comfortable with the technical stuff so that when we start talking about composition, and then I give you a homework assignment that says, hey, take pretty pictures, right? You guys aren't like fumbling with the camera and you take overexposed pictures that are off white balance and out of focus. Okay, so hopefully you can incorporate the things that we're actually learning in class to take good pictures. Okay, so we're going to talk about some of the main rules and guidelines that are often given as guidelines when you're taking pictures. The first thing I want to say is that I don't follow those rules necessarily. Okay, I don't think any experienced photographer does, but it's really good first step in how to think about taking pictures. Okay, so when we talk about composition, okay, you're basically arranging the elements in your picture. Okay, whether that's your subject or your background. Okay, the arrangement of the elements, that's what composition is. What you have to realize is that in a lot of real life photography, you don't really have complete control over where the elements are. Okay, so if you're taking pictures of sports, you can't control where that person's running. Okay, so you have to work with what you get. Okay, and that's just true in most real life pictures. Now it's not true when you're doing more abstract stuff or when you're setting it up or when you're doing like studio photography or something like that. Then you can control almost every aspect of it. But in real life, kind of just I'm taking pictures of my friends sort of thing. That's not something that's going to be possible. Okay, so you have to work with what you have. So first concept that I want to go over is this concept of positive versus negative space. Okay, this comes from more of the art side of things.
without going into too much detail, and I mean people study this stuff, and you know, it's hard to explain. I think it's more of an intuition thing that you start to build. But basically, I just want you to understand that the subject of your picture, whatever your subject is, that's considered positive space, and everything else around it is considered negative space. Okay? And so now, for each picture, you can argue how much of it is actual positive space, how much of it is actually negative space. That's harder to define sometimes, right, depending on the picture, right? But the important concept here is that your negative space also matters. Okay? Your positive space is your subject, but depending on where you place your subject and what you choose to place in the background, the shape of the negative space is changing. Okay, so here's a demonstration, right? You guys have seen these before, right? Where the positive and negative space both have some sort of shape, right? There's like a little cup thing, but then there's like two faces, right? And so kind of I know a lot of artists, they study like how the positive space interacts with the negative space, and that's how a lot of like fine art photography works. Like you guys will see a picture and it's like, what the heck does that mean? Or like, what is that? Or why did that win an award or something? Right? So I think artists look at things differently. I'm not really from an art background, right? But you know, with the little training that I've had, right, you start to kind of be able to see this, right? The difference between positive and negative space. Okay. So some other topics we're going to consider, right? So with that kind of with that background of positive negative space, we're going to be talking about different guidelines. Okay. So first thing is perspective and position, and then proportions, and then the two rules. We're going to really go over our rule of thirds and diagonal rule. Okay, and then there's some other ones, some more minor ones that I'll go over. Okay, so the first thing I want to go over is perspective versus position. Well, I guess it's really mainly just perspective. Okay, and this is the way in which a three-dimensional object is rendered onto a flat two-dimensional surface. Now, you guys have no idea what that means. Okay, so I'm going to show you. Okay, this picture, all right, versus this picture, versus this picture. Okay, do you guys kind of get what I'm going at now? So we live in a three-dimensional world, right? But a picture is two-dimensional. Okay, so how you choose to capture the relationship between Mike Park and the blinds in the background, or the room, right? That changes the picture completely. Okay, the size of his head is relatively the same in these pictures, but his background is changing. Okay. This is a great series of pictures. I've been using it in every single MYT class I taught. Okay, but hopefully you guys get the idea. Okay, so now, you know, if I'm like this, I'm like, the lens is like 2 inches away from his face or something like that. Okay, and then here I'm like 6 feet away from him. Okay, so my position changes, right? That changes my perspective as I change the background, right? And so this is getting on the importance of the negative space. Right, my subject is Mike, right? But then depending on what I choose to put around him, the picture changes a lot. Okay, so this is how you have to start thinking about when you compose pictures, right? It's not just about the picture. So recently I got a question from someone who photographed the element retreat, and then she was like, yeah, like, I thought like you could just point the camera at, well, she's not a photographer. I don't know why she was OP, but she asked me, like, I thought you could just point the camera at people laughing and then it would just come out and like it would look good, right? But that's not how it works, right? You have to actually think about like where you're standing, where they are, what's in the background. Those things all matter when you're taking a picture. Okay. So this is what I'm talking about when I talk about perspective. Okay. So now perspective also changes by where you're standing, right? Another way to change perspective is to change the height at which you're at. Okay, so if you're a little bit taller, okay, so I'm on the taller side, right? If I'm just standing up straight and walking around, I'm always going to be shooting people at a downward angle, right? And for the most part, that's not how other people see the world, because people at our church tend to be shorter than me, right? So then they see the world at a slightly different height. No, I'm dead serious right now. Like, the 1 foot difference actually makes a really big difference in like how you see different things, the angle at which you see it. And so oftentimes I actually crouch when I take pictures. And that's not just because like, it's also because it just gives you a different perspective, right? A different perspective, right? And so a picture just standing up, a picture where I'm on a chair versus a picture where I'm crouching on the ground, right? Those all come out very differently. And it gives a different feel to the picture. Okay, so that's just true. Okay, so learning to take that into consideration and trying different shots, okay, that's a good skill to have. So here's a picture where it demonstrates both of those. Okay, so this is, I'm in this picture, but I set up this shot. Okay, so I chose this on purpose, okay? And I'm gonna explain to you my thought process. Just above, so right now it looks like there's like this expansive mountain behind us, right? Actually, the truth is that just a little bit above that, the mountain ends. Okay, so then, but I wanted to give it the feel that like we're in the middle of like this big mountain land that you don't know where it ends, right? So in order to compress the background, I needed to use a longer focal length, right? Just like with Mike's picture, I'd be using this one, right, instead of this, right? I don't want to reveal so much of the background. Okay, another choice that I made was we're standing on what looks like a cliff, okay, but actually it just angles down and then there's like a lot of space behind us, right? But I wanted to give it the feel that like we're on the edge of a cliff, right? And so the perspective that was chosen was that the camera was a lot lower down, right? So that right here you can see the fence. There's a fence there, right? So if the camera were a little lower down, we could have gotten rid of the fence too, right? But that I didn't catch until later. But so those were two choices that were made. Those were explicit choices that were made in taking this picture, right, to set up this shot. Okay. So and then the position of the subjects, of course, I chose that, and then the position of the camera, I chose that. Right. So, any questions about the two elements? So perspective is how much you zoom, right, and where you are, like your distance from the subject, and then also how high up you are and what angle you're taking it from. Okay, so this is going to be a really quick exercise. I want you guys to pair up and take portraits of people with different perspective. Okay, so just produce like 3 or 4 pictures with different perspective. So what it's going to look like is you're going to look like you're going to walk towards each other and away from each other. Right? Try to keep their head the same in the picture, but the background's going to change. Question? Sorry, I can't hear you. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, yeah. Yes, the subject should stay in the same position. The photographer will move. Yeah. Okay, so I'll give you guys 5 minutes to do this. 5 minutes. And just stay indoors.
So I probably shouldn't use a time lens.
Yeah, you should probably use a zoom.
Use a zoom lens?
Yeah.
12 photos?
Man, there's too many lenses, dude.
Okay.
Close my mouth.
So could you go over the AI focus
Yeah.
versus one shot versus AI servo?
Yeah,
So this, I know this is constantly adjusting, so it's good for sports. What's the difference?
One shot is, I mean, it's just literally one shot, and it won't change the focus. That's what the photo as long as you want. Yeah, focus just depends. So if it sees motion each height, it will adjust it to something.
Okay, so I could, if I use AI focus, for the most part, it'll.
It'll do one shot.
So it's better just to
No,
have that mode all the time.
I actually, to be honest, I use AI focus, but I've never seen it like.
Oh, I see. I see.
So I usually just sit on
Effectively,
like
effectively.
Technically, it's one shot.
Okay. I guess I'll probably just use one shot. Unless I
Unless you need it to.
which because like let's say if it was someone running and I want to attract them, I would still use one shot. No, I wouldn't.
Well, yeah, because they're gonna be far and then they're gonna be close and then they're gonna be far again.
So I would use servo.
It would be servo.
Servo,
But I
and
try to get the most accurate picture of it. Or I might do one shot and do a large aperture. I mean, small.
I see.
That's not Oh yeah.
I don't.
Yeah, you just can't zoom
Why? Nice? But you can't
in. You can, but this is nice lens. It's like 28 millimeter.
Are your pictures running every
If I could, if I had the money, I'd buy a 28, 128, 50, 1.4.
What's good about it? What are the pros?
No, it's just a really sharp lens. Because it's a prime lens. It's sharp. It's really 1.4. But you can't do, so you won't be able to do this. That's the cheap. That's the one where you can buy it for cheap and then that was my second lens. That it's a lot. You learn. Because you can't really practice depth of field with the standard. I mean, there's only so much you can do. Like, there's only so much you can do.
It's really old.
Question.
Yeah, probably is. Hey, what were you saying? Like if you
It's
you zoom out and you get like really close on your subject, what does it do to the background?
It shows you more of the background. And as you get farther away and then you zoom in, you go like
Oh,
this,
okay,
you
that makes sense.
So basically think of it like, I mean it's like, I see this versus like,
So it's better to do this.
it's not, I'm not saying it's better.
It just depends on
It just
how you
depends on
want
what
to
you're,
compose.
what you're trying to do. Yeah. Sometimes you want to see a lot. I actually do a lot of wide angle shots where I want to see a lot of what's going on.
So then that means you're.
I'm wide and I'm close.
That's pretty awkward for the person.
Well, I mean, I'm not doing it in a portrait setting. Like for event photography, things like that. Like, people here, but I'll take a wide shot because I want to see what's going on.
So then would you also then play with like your picture?
You don't need to. It's complete. It's just a full picture.
So the main thing here then you're just adjusting your zoom and how far you are.
Yeah.
Okay, let's bring it back. So you can finish up your pictures.
I think my shutter's still broken.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure there's something wrong with it.
I tried to shoot again at 1200.
When you took that picture of Mike Park, was it like you stayed in one place, but then you like took it really close with the lens, like fully
Wide.
zoomed out, and then you stepped back, zoomed in, stepped back, zoomed in?
Exactly. Yeah.
See the gears turning in your guys' brains and kind of understanding it, so that's good. Okay, so yeah, basically when you're doing this, right, hopefully the subject wasn't moving and you were moving around, right, and changing the zoom on your lens. Okay, so that's kind of the whole point. Okay, so really in composition, okay, again, we haven't even gone to the rules yet, right? I'm still trying to get you guys thinking about this, right? You can only really control two things, okay? Where is your camera
right? And then where's your camera pointed, I guess. Okay, where's your camera pointed? And what focal length are you shooting at? Okay, those are really the only two decisions you can really make, okay, when you're thinking about composition. Okay? So think about that, right? So that means where you're standing and how much zoom you have or what lens you choose to use. That's really all you have. Okay? There's really nothing else you can control, right? All right. Oh, but then there's like, you can choose a couple other things, right? But really the primary things are those two things, but you can also choose, what you focus on, right? Again, we talked about that last week, right? Depending on what you focus on, you can guide the viewer's eye, right? And then also what proportion your picture is, okay? So that's the next topic, right? For most of you, this won't really matter, right? Because you're just gonna take the picture and then you're just gonna, keep it at that, right? But standard cameras have a 3:2 proportion, so I'm talking about the ratio of the length and the width of the picture itself. Okay, so most cameras have a 3:2. I know some cameras don't. Point and shoot's a little bit different. I forget exactly what the real ratio is. But, right, so standard cameras have a 3:2 ratio, HD video has 16:9, right? Any picture, you can choose to crop it, right? To change that proportion, it actually changes how that picture feels, right? And then, nowadays Instagram is really, really popular, right? Which, by the way, right, if you think about all the lens defects we talked about today, Instagram basically just adds all the lens defects back, right? And then it changes the colors to make it, off-white balance and changes anyways. So basically what it's doing is ruining the picture and then you get an artsy picture, right? Okay, so, anyways. I'm not bitter. Okay, so Polaroid, right? Instagram, Polaroid, they try to imitate the kind of the older pictures, right? It's a 1:1, it's a square picture, right? So depending on what you're trying to do, you might change the proportion of your picture, right? And it's important to understand. So going back to the whole idea of positive and negative space, changing your proportion changes your negative space, right? Changes how the background is interacting with the edge of the picture, right? And that's actually a really important part of composition. Okay, so that's why proportion actually really matters. So now we're going to get into the actual standard stuff that you will learn in a photography class. Okay? The rule of thirds. Now, who has heard of the rule of thirds before? All right. Who has never heard of the rule of thirds before? Awesome. Okay, so you guys will be learning something. Okay, so the rule of thirds is probably the most taught rule in photography in terms of composition, and it's probably the most broken rule. Okay, so that's okay, all right, but there's a kind of a concept of what it's trying to teach, okay, and I'll get to that in a minute. But basically what it says is that the image is most pleasing is when its subjects or regions are composed along imaginary lines which divide the image approximately to thirds, okay. A variation of this is the golden ratio rule, right, which instead of doing exactly thirds, it does the lines at a golden ratio, right, but it's generally basically 3 regions, okay. It's counterintuitive, but a balanced picture often will have the subject to the side, right? If you actually read your camera's manual, it says to take a portrait, place your subject on the center of your frame, and then click the button or something. Or it actually says to put your subject in the center, but if you look at a lot of pictures, that's actually not the case, right? That's actually not the case. So, but then again, oftentimes it is the case. So I don't want to say that this is a rule, but just understand that this rule is meant to teach you that putting things on the side is okay. Okay, putting things on the side is okay. So we'll see some examples of that. Okay, this is just a picture from DPS, I think, the Digital Photography School. Never mind, it's from colorpilot.com. Okay, so you can see, right, some main elements of the picture are along the thirds lines, right? It's not on it necessarily, right? But you can kind of see how the picture divides, right? The horizon is on the third line, right? And then the boat is on the third line. All right, so we're just gonna go through some pictures. Okay, I actually don't know why this is not a very good example. I don't like this picture. Okay, so here's one, right? So like kind of football and the football player is a little bit off center, right? Actually, this is not a great example either. But anyways, you can kind of see. Okay, so here's Terry, right? Terry's eyes, right? Terry's eyes are at the third line, okay? And the light on his face, that's kind of where your attention is drawn. That's around the third line also, okay? So what you have to realize is that I'm not taking these pictures like, oh, I have to put it on the third line, okay? So you might be thinking that like I'm reverse engineering this, right? But I'm actually just showing you pictures that I took, right? Just from intuition, like this is how I think it looks good, right? And then I'm showing you after the fact that the rule of thirds somehow applied a little bit. Okay, so they're not going to be exact. Okay. So here's a landscape photo, right? You can see approximately, right, the horizon divides at the third, and then the campanile, which is the subject of the picture, comes at the third line also, right? But then, again, think about like the whole positive and negative element thing, right? So what would be the positive kind of space here, and what would be the negative space here, right? And how that balance is. It's kind of an abstract concept. You just have to kind of feel it. So I'll let you feel it for a bit. Okay, anyways, moving on. All right, so here's another, right? Okay, not a great example again, but you can kind of see how it works, right? How it feels. I hope the picture feels balanced. Okay. If you disagree with me, you can say you disagree with me, or just shake your head at me. Okay. All right. Again, here's a picture. Region, the middle region. That's where I put the people. Right, the top third and the bottom third don't include this. So I didn't zoom in more. I didn't zoom out more. Right, like there must have been a reason I chose to do it at that focal length. Right, and then you can kind of see the thirds, how it divides. Right, often again for portraits, the eyes want to be at the third level. Right. Okay, so for vertical shots too, right, you can see how the person on the left, right, is divided into thirds kind of, right, the region above her, the region below her, right, and then the main part of her is in the middle, right, and again for the picture of VLSB, you can see the grass portion is the bottom third, the buildings the middle third, and the sky is the top third, right, it just so happened that way, okay. Some more examples, right, their torsos are the middle third, and then on the right, kind of the group where the faces are, right, where the attention of the picture is, that's in the middle third, right? Calvin asked me to not to put this in here, but because he saw my slides, but it's okay. All right, so again, right, rule of thirds in portraits, right? Eyes, right, not in the center of the picture, right? Face not in the center of the picture. Probably for this, the fact that there's something on the right side in the background helps balance it out, right? Okay, this is, okay, again, this is my cousin, but it's not a rule, right? So like, this is not exactly rule of thirds, right? I wouldn't even say that this picture looks balanced, necessarily, right? But, again, I'm just trying to get at the point that it's okay to put things on the side, okay? And I think when people start photography, like, I don't know why, but everything ends up in the middle of the picture. It's like you're afraid to make it fall off the picture or something. Okay, so experiment with putting things on the side, okay, and see what you think looks good. Okay, and you can't really, sometimes you can't tell until you actually try it. Okay, it's hard to envision it. Right? You want the action, right, whatever action's going on to be, again, off center. Right? And then, a little thing I can add is like, there's a sense in which, like, when there's movement in the picture, right, you either want to leave room for the movement or you want to take away room for the movement. So now what I mean is that Bunjin is going to the left here, right? So I could have either made the choice to, okay, well, first of all, I wasn't really making a choice here because I was just shooting like crazy because they're running really fast. And the composition was chosen by cropping afterwards. Okay, but I could have either chosen to leave more room on the left side, so put Bunjin on the right side of the picture, or I could choose to put him on the left. Those pictures would look different. Okay, in this case, I chose to put him on the left. All right. One of the general rules of thumb is that you want to give room for the motion, right, in order to feel balanced. I chose to go the opposite direction in this picture, so I broke that rule. Okay, so that rule says I would have put Bunjin on the right side since he's going in that direction. I want to put more room on the left. Okay, we'll see more examples of that later. Right, again, you see kind of the main region in which their heads are, right, is kind of in the middle thirds, right? Okay, for landscapes, right? Again, the subject of your picture doesn't have to be lit. So here's an example where the silhouette is actually the subject. Okay. Oops. Okay, another example, the trees, kind of where the sky and the trees meet. It kind of divides the picture into thirds. Okay. And it's not just necessarily about dividing the picture into thirds. What it also says is that if you place the most interesting object or whatever you want the object to, whatever you want people to look at one of the intersections, right, the middle 4 intersections, then that's a good place to put it, right? It'll feel balanced. Again, it's not a rule, okay, but it just so happens that way. Okay, and it's an easy way for you to understand how that works. Okay. Any questions about rule of thirds? And so, all of these things we're learning, I want you guys to try it out. Okay, at first it's going to seem kind of mechanical, like, oh, I'm just dividing the picture into thirds and putting it on the intersection. Okay, but through that, and as you look at more pictures, hopefully you gain a sense of what is a balanced picture versus what is not. Okay. All right, so the next rule is the diagonal rule, which says that an image is most pleasing when its subject falls on or follows a diagonal line, or is a diagonal line, right, in some abstract cases. Right, some related techniques to that is converging lines. So you guys know what converging lines are, right? They're lines that converge right into one point. Okay, and then leading lines, right? Leading lines is which basically you have lines in the picture or some path in the picture that leads your eye to the subject. Okay, so we'll go over some examples of that. This one is it's just diagonal. Okay, so there's no like converging lines here or anything like that. So sometimes if you put like diagonal or if you put like askew horizons, then sometimes the picture ends up being a little more interesting, sometimes not. Okay, so you just kind of have to experiment with that. All right, so here's just an example of like pictures that are kind of, if you do it just with a regular picture, like on the left there, right, just gives it, sometimes it gives it a sense of motion, like things are off balance, things are moving around. Right, so it's oftentimes like, in those cases I will skew my horizon or I'll try to put in diagonals into my picture. Right. The right side could be argued as something that's leading lines, right? But it's not really, but it kind of is, right? So as you follow the lines, like you kind of see, you just notice the subjects one by one, right? Of course, all of this happens really fast, right? It's not like I'm thinking about it, oh, I'm looking at each person one by one, but it helps, right, if you're actually designing a picture. Right, again, another picture. So this is converging lines, right? The hall converges in the back, and it's diagonal, a bunch of diagonal lines everywhere. Right, here's an example of converging, naturally converging, right? Horizon with like a hallway or kind of road. Converging lines, right? So in this picture, right, I mean, it's a tree, but really the picture is just a shape, right? The shape that it creates, right? That's really the subject. This is a really old picture. This is, I don't know why this is in here, because I think there's definitely converging lines, but the converging lines in this picture don't actually serve any, it's not the subject of the picture, or it doesn't lead to anything, because the subject of the picture is not at the end of the leading lines. So I think this is a good example of including those things, but it doesn't really do anything, okay, to the picture. It doesn't help it at all. Okay, it just happens to be in the picture. This could be argued as leading lines. So if you notice the roof, right? There's converging lines there, right? Again, it's really subtle, but it's there. Okay, so this was submitted by Ellen last MYT, right? So this is for her homework assignment using converging lines. She used converging lines to lead into the subject. Right? That's the example. Okay, any questions about diagonal lines, converging lines? Okay, let's move on to symmetry and asymmetry. So I talked about like rule of thirds, right? Always should put things to the side, right? But sometimes you should put things in the center. Okay, so I'm gonna contradict myself. Okay, so like, I think this picture would look really weird if I put it like off to the side. Okay, so some pictures just work, right, if there's natural symmetry, and if the symmetry is what you want to highlight. Right here, like I didn't make the middle of the book on a third line, right? I didn't think that would help the picture, right? So sometimes the picture is balanced, or sometimes, I mean, even if it's not balanced, you want it to be in the center, right? You want to put the highlight on the center, right? To maybe even create an off-balance feel, right? Again, I'm showing you a bunch of abstract ones for now, but so here's more of a, or here's a picture, right? So here there's kind of a balance between symmetry and asymmetry, right? Kind of gives it a sense of imbalance, and that was kind of what I was going for. right? Like picture of Pastor Ed at the podium, like there's no need to put him on the side. I mean, right? Like it's pretty balanced as it is. Okay, that's just how the picture turns out. Okay. Again, that's not a big topic, symmetry versus asymmetry. Okay, again, the whole thing is about balancing the picture, and it depends on what you want the people to feel like when they see the picture, or what you want them to see. Okay, so symmetry and asymmetry is available, right, as a technique. Okay. Another technique you can use, right, so these are all like kind of smaller techniques. The biggest ones are diagonal rule and rule of thirds. So you can frame the subject using your foreground, or you can just include foreground elements. Okay, so your subject's kind of in the back. You can choose to put things in the foreground. It actually makes the picture a little more interesting. Okay. So this would be an example of framing, right? And then just foreground elements, like they're not necessary, right? But sometimes it can add to the picture, right? Not all the time, but right. So foreground elements, like without the foreground element here, it would just be a picture of a plane, right? But it adds a little bit of shapes, makes it a little more interesting. Again, right, the foreground elements kind of help the picture here, I think. Okay. So even, I mean, something like pretty insignificant, like, I don't know, it can sometimes make the picture a little more interesting. Okay. Another technique you might want to use is simplifying the background. Again, when you're doing like event pictures or like everyday pictures, this is hard, like you can't really control your background. But one technique you can use, right, is compressing the background, right, which is what I showed you with the different perspectives. So if you use a narrow depth of field and you get farther away from the subject, you can actually compress the background so you don't see as much of the background, right? That simplifies the picture. So that's one technique, right? If you're doing more like kind of like studio photography, you can choose to, get rid of the background. Like if you're taking a picture of something for someone, right, don't put stuff in the background, right? If you have a specific subject, just simplify the background, just get rid of everything. Okay. I actually don't have that many great pictures. I had more slides, but I don't know what happened to them, so that's it for that. Keep the horizon level, okay? If you don't have a reason to make the horizon diagonal or like skewed, then you should keep it level, okay? That is just a good kind of tip, right? So keep the horizon level, especially when you're taking sunset pictures. Okay, there's no reason to make the sunset look like it's gonna fall off or something, okay? Just keep it level, right? Unless you're going for something specific, okay? So keep the horizon level. So now you might want to not, right? And that's completely okay, right? Again, if you want to give a sense of motion, or in this case, like I was actually riding a bike, so I didn't really have much control over the situation. Okay, so I was just shooting, right? Right, and then, sometimes you want to give a sense of motion, right? Like I said. Right, and sometimes it's okay to make the horizon diagonal. Okay, another technique is to use your negative space creatively. Okay. So you can use more negative space to give your picture kind of a sense of imbalance or a more solitary mood, or depending on like what the subject is doing, it just gives a different feel to the picture. Again, a lot of stuff is really hard to define. Okay, it's stuff that you're going to have to try. And again, like I said, you can choose to have the negative space. So in this case, for example, Chris is pointing into the negative space, right? I'm giving him room because he's interacting with that direction. So this is supposed to give the picture a more balanced feel, right? But you can make him look off, right? You can make people look off screen, right? Or off the picture, right? And it gives a different feel to the picture, right? And so that's a choice that you can make, right? Wait, what is this? Oh, negative space, that's right. Okay, right. Okay, so the picture here is mostly negative space, right? It's mostly negative space. It gives a certain feel to the picture. Again, this is a really recent picture that I took, right? I chose to not make the horizon at the third line, right? I chose, because the sky was pretty, just blue on that side. I included a little bit of the cloud, and then I chose to have most of it as negative space, right, to give a certain feel, right? Again, negative space, a lot of negative space gives a certain feel. Okay? And yeah, depending on what you want the feel of the picture to be, you can, this was my first moving violation. I was like, came home and I took a picture of it. That's what a photographer does. Record every moment of your life. Okay, so So now the thing about, we talked about like balancing positive and negative space, right? So you guys are really distracted by this picture, right? Because, I mean, you see the subject and it's like, right, like what's going on, right? So sometimes it's hard to do that. Like if you wanted to think about the picture in this way, like composition, like I want to balance my positive negative space. Okay, a good technique then is to turn the picture around, right? It helps you see the shapes better, okay? So now you're not going to do this for every picture that you take, obviously, okay? But if it's something like, let's say you're learning composition right now, right? This week, next week, whatever, right? And you want to kind of study your pictures more in depth, like what do the shapes actually look like in my picture? A good technique is to just turn the picture around, right? It makes it a little less distracting and you can see the actual shapes that are interacting in this picture a little bit better. Okay. Now with all that said, okay, composition is important, but sometimes it's secondary to just capturing the moment. Okay, so you know, I always tell people, like, I mean, it's better to have a noisy picture than to have no picture. It's better to have a slightly blurry picture or out of focus picture than to have no picture, right? So like sometimes you get like too distracted by like this technical stuff, like, oh, it has to be like rule of thirds, it has to be like diagonal, oh, it has to be in focus, right? But then they'll like end up deleting a perfectly fine picture that captured like a really great moment, right? And so that would be a loss, right? And so you have to realize that, you know, what we're doing is we're capturing moments. So sometimes it's just about capturing the right moment, okay? Like this, like compositionally, like I have no idea what's going on here. I mean, it's like, right, like some really big rules were broken, like Noah's, like, hands and head are cut off, like you're never supposed to do that. I mean, there's a bunch of rules that are broken here, okay? But it's fine, right? It's a fine picture, okay? Like no big deal. Like again, this, like, it's not like that great of a picture, right? But it just captures a moment that's hard to envision like in a continuous one. It freezes something that, and it's new to the viewer, right? So that's completely fine, right? Again, this picture, like, it's a really special moment, like it's a special picture. It's not compositionally great, okay? But it's about capturing that moment, right? So there's an element of photography where it's not just about the composition, okay? It's also about like being aware of the situation and taking the picture at the right time. Okay? Again, horrible picture compositionally, okay? But man, it's, you know, good picture right there. Okay, and you get raked up off to the side. It's great, all right. Okay, again, right, another picture. Right, like it's like a good moment. There's just like a lot of things going on, and those Cheerios or whatever those are flying around, and I mean it's like it's not compositionally great, but like it's a good picture. Okay, right? That's a picture that you would like to have, right? So again, this one's like compositionally fine, but this one's out of focus. You can't tell from there, but if you printed it out or looked down a screen, you'd be able to tell it's out of focus. But again, like it captures a moment, right? And I think it's a fine picture to use, right? Even if it's out of focus. Okay. So I guess kind of what I'm trying to say is don't get too, like I'm teaching you this stuff, but don't get too like, I mean, it's not, those aren't rules. Okay, it's about capturing the picture, like the picture overall. Let's look at it holistically. Okay. All right, so some miscellaneous things in composition. Okay, don't crop out people's heads, hands, legs unless it's necessary or it's intended. Okay, so if you're taking a picture of someone, don't like crop out their hand. Okay, or if you're taking a group picture, don't like cut off people's feet. Okay, so that's just a general rule. There are places that are appropriate to cut. Okay, so if you're taking upper body shots or if you're cutting at legs, there's actually spots that are appropriate to cut. So for example, like if you cut the picture right at their knee, that's not appropriate. Okay, that looks really, really awkward. If you cut right below their knee, it's okay, right? And so these are really like detailed things, but actually affects the picture a lot. And it's actually something that I pay attention to a lot, and a lot of photographers will pay attention to, right? So it gets difficult when you're doing group shots where people are all different heights and their knees are at different heights, right? But you know, it's something that we're aware of. Other things, composition again, is about, part of it's about guiding the viewer's eye. So things you should know, some random things. Reds draw more attention than blues and greens. Okay, brightest points draw attention, right? Which is why vignetting is used sometimes to draw attention to the center of the picture. Lines and shapes draw attention. Okay, so when I'm taking group shots of like a moderate-sized group, I'll try to arrange the heads of the people into a shape, right? If it's like 6 people, I'll try to do like a hexagon or something. Okay, and I'm not like telling them to put their heads here, but just through guiding like where they're standing and stuff, that's what I'm trying to go for. I'm trying to create some shapes. Contrast draws attention, so strong contrasts, and that's both for color and for brightness. Okay? And then this is really something interesting that I read, which is depending on how you read, how the culture reads, where their eyes linger and the picture changes. So in Western culture, we read from left to right, top to bottom, and so the bottom right thirds, that kind of area of the picture actually gets the most attention because they scan and then they linger, right? And I've read that it's actually different for different cultures that read right to left, right? So that's just, I mean, that's not going to change your everyday, picture taking, but that's something interesting to know. Okay, last thing about composition is that it's pretty useful, right? So, I mean, I've never been formally trained in art, but like through photography and through like being critical of my own pictures, I'm kind of trying to figure this whole thing out. It's a skill or it's a kind of a discipline that I use in like everything that I make now, right? Even from like school reports to like my videos or whatever it is, even PowerPoints, right? So I think it's pretty useful, right? So if it's something that you guys want to, you guys can develop, right, and develop an eye for. Okay, so before our last activity or your last lab time, okay, so your assignment is basically you're going to imagine that you have a roll of 24 shot film, okay, and you're going to take 24 straight pictures, right, and you're not going to be allowed to delete any of the pictures, okay. So it's okay if you only like one of those pictures. That's actually normal, okay. So I want you guys to do that. It's just 24 straight shots. Okay, it's easier if you come up with some sort of theme for yourself. The theme can be anything. It can be like colors of the rainbow, or I don't know. You can make it really abstract, or it can be like portraits, like eyes.